Welcome. Today, we are diving deep into one of the most influential and, often misunderstood bodies of work in education. We're going to unpack the core ideas from John-Hattie's game-changing book, Visible Learning, the sequel. So let's get into it and see what the evidence really tells us about what works in learning.
So, Hattie's work kicks off with a question that really makes you stop and think. For decades, right, educators have been on this quest for what works in the classroom. But what if? What if that was the wrong question all along? What if the real secret to unlocking student achievement is hiding somewhere else entirely?
The world of education, it can feel like a maze, can it? It's filled with fads, new initiatives, and advice that seems to contradict itself every other week. Every year, there's some new program or a new piece of tech that promises to be the magic bullet. It's overwhelming, and it makes it so hard to know where to actually focus our energy.
Now, if you've heard of John-Hattie, you've probably seen the league table, that famous ranked list of everything that can influence learning. But here's the thing. Hattie himself says this is the biggest misunderstanding of his work. The goal was never to just look at the list and tick off the top items. The real story, and this is what we're digging into today, is so much deeper.
Okay, so how do we cut through all that noise and confusion? Well, Hattie's answer was to build basically an engine, a massive, evidence-based engine designed to sift through everything and find the common truths about what really impacts student learning.
And the fuel for this engine? It's a really powerful research method called a meta-analysis. So instead of just looking at one study by itself, a meta-analysis gathers up all the credible studies on the topic, we're talking hundreds, sometimes thousands, and combines them to find the overall effect. It's all about finding that big picture truth, right?
And the scale we're talking about here is just staggering. This isn't about a handful of studies. Visible Learning, the sequel, is built on a synthesis of over 2,100 separate meta-analyses. And get this, that research covers more than 200 million students from all over the world. It's the largest evidence base of its kind, period.
Now this is where it gets really interesting. When you plot out the effect of every single thing we do in education, you see this. Almost everything has a positive impact. As Hattie says, claiming you can improve student achievement is, well, it's trivial. Pretty much everyone can. And that right there is why just asking what works is the wrong question.
The right question is what works best. And to answer that, Hattie gives us one powerful number, 0.42. This is the average effect size, which is just a standard way to measure impact. He calls this the hinge point. Anything above this line is where we want to be, in the zone of desired effects. That's the bar. That's the benchmark we should all be aiming for.
So armed with all this evidence, Hattie lays out a new model for how we should think about teaching. It's not about finding some magic program. Instead, it's a deliberate, thoughtful process he calls intentional alignment.
At the heart of this is the DIE model. And think of this less like a checklist and more like a professional way of thinking. It's a cycle. You start by diagnosing where your students are really at. Then you choose a high-probability intervention based on the evidence. You implement it well, and then, and this is the absolute key, you evaluate your own impact. Did it work? If not, why not? It's this constant loop of learning and improving. And the intervention you choose has to match the type of learning you're aiming for. Hattie breaks this down into 3 levels. Knowing that is that surface-level stuff like memorizing historical dates. Knowing how is deeper. It's understanding the causes behind that historical event. But knowing with, that's the holy grail. That's being able to use that deep understanding to analyze something happening today. A great lesson is intentionally designed to move students through all 3.
And when you boil it all down, when you get to the absolute heart of it, all of this leads to the central thesis of the entire book. It's not the program, it's not the curriculum, it's not the length of the school day. What matters most is how educators think.
This idea is so huge, it really deserves its own moment. The shift from focusing on what teachers do to how teachers think, that's probably the most critical update in all of Hattie's work.
So what does this mindset, this mind frame actually look like? Well, the most effective educators, they share a set of core beliefs. It's the belief that I am a change agent, not a victim of my circumstances. It's a focus on evaluative thinking, constantly using assessments, not just to grade kids, but as feedback on my own teaching. It's a deep commitment to understanding and improving their own impact.
And all of this really comes down to 3 simple but incredibly powerful words: know thy impact.
It's a mantra, really. It challenges every single one of us in education to move away from just assuming things work and instead to become an evaluator of our own effectiveness. It's about using evidence to answer that one crucial question: is what I'm doing actually working for my students?
Okay, so let's make this real. Let's see what this looks like in practice. Because when you compare the high-impact stuff with some of the common things we do that have a much lower impact, well, the results can be really, really surprising.
All right, check this out. Collective teacher efficacy. That's the shared belief among the staff that, yes, we can make a difference. It's one of the most powerful influences out there. Its effect size is a massive 1.44. Now compare that to a big structural change like creating single-sex schools, which has a tiny effect of 0.07. It's not about the building setup, it's about the belief system inside it.
Or how about this one? Teacher credibility. When a student truly believes their teacher is competent, trustworthy, and passionate, has an incredible effect size of 1.09. And yet homework for elementary school kids, it actually has a slightly negative effect. See the difference? One builds trust and belief, the other often just creates stress for very little learning gain at that age.
And a final one, how we group our students. The practice of not labeling kids, of holding high expectations for every single one of them, has a strong positive impact of 0.61. But tracking or streaming students into different ability groups, the effect is tiny, just 0.10. And worse, the research shows it can create these dead-end educational paths for students in the lower tracks.
So in the end, Hattie isn't just leaving us with data. He's leaving us with a challenge, a direct call to action. It's an invitation for every single person involved in education to become a curious, critical thinker, to embrace this mindset of constant evaluation and getting better.
So when you take a step back, the big takeaway from all this incredible evidence, it isn't a simple checklist or some magic formula. It's a fundamental shift in how we see our role. The most important question we can ask isn't some generic what works. It's a much more personal, much more powerful, and much more challenging question: do I know my impact? And that might just be the one question that changes everything.